Hey, Michael Petrovich Team Home Loan. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to figure out how much mortgage you can afford in Nebraska. So the reason I say Nebraska is because here we have somewhat unique taxes and insurance. By unique, I mean they're higher. So taxes in Nebraska are pretty high compared to the rest of the country. And insurance, just due to hail, is higher in Nebraska than typical. So if you're moving from another state, especially, the taxes and insurance might shock you a bit. But those are things that can throw off how much house you can afford. So the houses are cheaper in Nebraska, but the tax and insurance pretty much offset that. So what they're going to calculate, how they're going to calculate your affordability on a mortgage, they're going to look at your consumer debts. So that's all the debts that are showing on your credit report. So they don't look at balances; they look at your monthly payments. So what's your minimum monthly payment on there? And this can be different. So your credit card could have a $500 balance but have a $50 payment. You could have another credit card that has a $2,000 balance but has a $30 payment. In that case, the $30 payment is less than that $50 payment. So what they're concerned about is the monthly payment, not necessarily the balance on the credit card, as far as figuring out your affordability. So we're going to look at installment loans, car loans, student loans. Student loans a little different, a little trickier. If if you're not making payments on the student loans, they're going to add a 1% payment onto that student loan. If your student loan is $1,000, they're going to add a $10 payment. If it's $100,000, they're going to add a $1,000 payment. So that is an issue that can pop up a lot with, especially with people with larger student loans, is that even if you're not making payments on them, we have to add a payment into your debt to calculate affordability. Um, Car loans, credit cards, all that kind of stuff, they're going to use as well. Anything showing in your credit report. Um, Things that don't show in your credit report is rent, insurance, any subscriptions, utilities. Those things don't show on your credit, so those don't count towards your debt ratios. Just what shows on your credit report is what we're going to use. They're also going to use child support. If you're paying child support, if you're paying alimony, if you're paying a tax lien, if you're paying on a judgment, these are things that also have to be included. And for a lot of these things, they're not. I can't see them on my end unless you tell me about them initially. They will find out about them as we order title, as we kind of get deeper into the underwriting process. But if you are paying on a tax lien, on a judgment especially, these are things I can't see initially, but always tell me up front because they're going to find out, and better we find out early and figure out what we can do rather than find out later in the process and have it disqualify you from getting that house that you have under contract. So those items I need to know about as soon as possible. Back to the taxes and insurance. There's going to be the mortgage payment, and on top of that, they're going to tack on 1/12 of the taxes and 1/12 of the insurance. So we have to factor that in as well. Which these are things, if you don't have a house yet, if you're just starting the process, we won't know the taxes, we won't know the insurance. So in the beginning, we have to take kind of an educated guess and just double, as you find houses that you like, we'll double check and make sure they still fit within your guidelines for affordability. But those are just some factors that we have to consider. For insurance, really hard to get an exact quote until you actually have the house, but talking to your insurance agent early to get a rough idea of insurance based on your insurance history is going to help as well. Um, so this is not necessarily affordability, but what you can afford. So I hear this a lot is that what they will lend on is actually fairly generous to what people actually want to pay. People will come in all the time and say, how much, what's the max I can afford? A lot of times the max is way beyond what they actually want to buy. So I always tell people, what's your price point? And they'll just say, what's my max? I'm like, your max is going to be, $500,000, but you're only looking for a house in the 250 range. So you're fine. You're well within the guidelines, but it's important to, factor in not just what you qualify for, but what you can afford. So a good example of this is, especially for first-time homebuyers that come in, if they're starting to get to that max of their affordability on the approval, on the mortgage approval, we'll talk about taking into consideration that a house is going to have repairs. There's going to be maintenance on a house that you wouldn't have had renting. There's going to be utilities that are likely going to be higher, and there's going to be more utilities on a house than there would be on an apartment. So are you factoring these in? Because this has happened in the past where someone buys a house and they come back later and say, I can't afford to pay for it because of all those little extra things, and I really can't afford the house anymore. I've had a few people even later on down the road end up renting the house out and going back to renting for a while until they can improve their income a bit. So something to consider. If don't go to your max, or if you are going to go to your max, make sure that you're taking into consideration those other obligations, the mortgage. Then the maintenance on the house, the added utilities, just the little incidentals that are going to go with owning a property. They're just going to be there. So taxes, insurance, consumer debt, but then also factoring in the overall affordability with those extra utilities, things like that, is something to consider when trying to figure out what you can afford in Nebraska. So if you are looking to possibly purchase in the future, if it's your first time, second time, you haven't done it in a while, give us a call, send us a message. We'll go through it with you, kind of figure out, get a rough idea, even without an application, just over the phone, what you qualify for. And if you want to move forward, we can start looking more deeply into what you qualify for. All right. Thanks, guys.